The grand estate sat in eerie silence, the type of quiet that only came after violence had struck. The mansion's opulent halls, once filled with laughter and power, now seemed hollow. The bloodied hand of Vincent Marcelli, the infamous crime lord, trembled as it reached out for the phone lying just inches from his grasp. His vision blurred, but the cold screen illuminated his face as the final message was typed. "It's done. The king is dead." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of betrayal. The death of Vincent would change everything. No longer would his enemies fear the thunderous power of the Marcelli family. As the seconds ticked by, Vincent's life slipped away, and with it, a world of control and corruption began to unravel. The camera cut away, lingering on the lifeless body and the whisper of impending chaos in the shadows. Who pulled the trigger? Was this an act of revenge, or something far more calculated? This was just the beginning. The echoes of Vincent's death hung heavy in the air, reverberating through the halls of the mansion like a whisper in the dark. In the moments that followed, chaos reigned in silence. His empire was in freefall, but for those still loyal, it was time for decisions. Outside the mansion's walls, the criminal world held its breath, uncertain of what would come next. The phone call that Vincent had never made echoed louder than any gunshot. It was the end of an era. The underworld that had once obeyed his every command was now a fractured beast, hungry for a new king. Inside, at the heart of the empire, Maria Caldwell, Vincent's closest confidante and a longtime family member, paced back and forth in the dimly lit office. She knew the power vacuum left behind by his death would be filled quickly, but who would fill it? And at what cost? Maria had always been the right hand of power, the strategist. She was the one who'd kept the Marcelli empire running, even when Vincent's eyes wandered, lost in his own world. She could still feel the weight of his loss, but there was no time for grief. Not now. As the air outside the mansion grew colder, so did the ambitions within. There was no turning back now. They were all in this game, and the rules were about to change. The phone in Maria's hand buzzed again. Another call from an unknown number, a familiar pattern that had become impossible to ignore. This time, the voice on the other end was different. Rougher. "The king is dead," the voice said, almost with a sense of finality. "It's time to move." Maria's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't show it. She wasn't sure who she could trust anymore, but the urgency in the voice was undeniable. She gripped the phone tighter, her mind racing. There had been whispers for weeks about a shift in the balance of power. A new player was emerging. But who were they? And why had they decided that now, of all times, was the moment to make their move? Her eyes shifted to the door. No one had come in yet, and she preferred it that way. She needed time to think, time to prepare. But every passing second felt like it was closing in on her. The Marcelli family's future was in flux. One misstep, and everything could collapse. Maria knew this was her moment, but it could also be her end. The game was changing, and she needed to decide where her loyalty truly lay. The next few minutes passed in a blur, but Maria had no time to think about the confusion. Phone call confirmed what she had feared. There were forces at work here that she didn't understand. Third-party organization, something she hadn't anticipated, was moving in on the Marcella's empire. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as she paced the room. Her mind worked quickly, formulating a plan. "I'm so gone." She couldn't let anyone know she was in contact with these outsiders. If the wrong people found out, it would be the end. But if she played her cards right, she could secure her position as the new leader, taking control of the empire. But at what cost? She thought of Vincent, of all the years she had spent working alongside him. Was it loyalty that bound her to the Marcelli family, or was it the thirst for power that had always driven her? As she walked to the window and looked out into the darkened city, she realized that no matter what decision she made, there would be no going back. The game had already begun, and Maria Caldwell had to be ready to play. In the stillness of the mansion, a single thought crossed Maria's mind: she had to act now. The longer she hesitated, the more likely it was that someone else would step in and take the throne. She wasn't about to let that happen. The door to her office creaked open, and a man stepped inside. It was Tony, her most trusted bodyguard. He was loyal to her, but even loyalty could be questioned in times like this. His heavy boots echoed on the marble floor as he approached her, his face unreadable. "You got the message, Maria?" Tony asked, his voice low. She nodded, without turning around, the weight of his question sinking in. "I'll handle it," Maria replied. "But no one can know about this, not yet." The room fell into silence again as Tony left. Maria turned back to the window, feeling the pull of destiny and danger tugging at her. The world was changing, and she would need to move faster than anyone expected. King was dead, but his empire was far from finished. The tension in the room was palpable. Maria stood at the grand window, her gaze fixed on the city below as the rain began to fall harder, casting a gray veil over the streets. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest, the air thick with the consequences of Vincent's death. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text message. It wasn't from any of her usual contacts. It read simply, "We know who you are. The time has come to align." Maria's stomach churned as she read the message. The sender was anonymous, but the implications were clear. There were players in the game who had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to make their move. And now that moment had arrived. The cryptic message was both a threat and an invitation. Her thoughts raced. She could continue to fight for control of the Marcelli empire, but there were risks. The world she had once known was crumbling, and in its place, a new power was rising. As the rain beat against the glass, Maria knew that the alliances she had built over the years were no longer enough. She needed to decide if she would trust the shadowy figures behind the message, or risk everything by trying to retain control of the empire on her own. As the night deepened, Maria's office door creaked open. A tall, heavily built man entered without a word, his presence commanding attention. It was Tony, her most loyal enforcer. His eyes locked with hers as he stepped closer. "Maria," Tony said, his voice low but urgent, "there's a man here to see you. He says he's part of the Syndicate, someone who's been watching the family for a long time. He wants to talk business." Maria's instincts told her to be cautious, to reject the meeting. But her curiosity, fueled by the uncertainty of the moment, led her to make a choice. "Bring him in," she ordered. The door closed softly behind Tony as he left to fetch the visitor. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening as the minutes stretched on. Maria felt a strange sense of unease, knowing that the balance of power was shifting. She was playing a dangerous game, and it was no longer clear who the real enemy was. The door swung open again, this time revealing a man in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored gray suit. His features were sharp, his dark eyes calculating. His name was Luca, and he was a representative of the Syndicate, a powerful, shadowy organization that Maria had heard whispers about for years but never truly understood. Luca stepped inside confidently, his gaze never leaving Maria. "You're Maria Caldwell," he said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "I've heard a lot about you. Your reputation precedes you." Maria studied him carefully, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk. "And you are?" she asked, her tone clipped. Luca smiled, a slow, almost predatory grin. "I'm the person who can help you take control. All you need to do is make the right decision." His words were laced with an underlying threat, though his demeanor remained calm. Maria could feel the weight of his gaze, and the tension in the room thickened. She was now at the crossroads she had feared. Would she risk her family's empire for the power this man promised, or would she try to hold on to what she had? The air between Maria and Luca crackled with tension. He wasn't just offering her power, he was offering her an alliance, a chance to rise above the collapsing Marcelli family. But at what cost? "I don't need your help," Maria said firmly, but her words lacked conviction. She was lying to herself. The Marcelli empire was crumbling, and she could feel the pressure mounting on all sides. If she refused Luca, someone else would step in, and she would be left with nothing. Luca's smile widened, sensing her hesitation. The Marcelli family's time has passed, Maria. The Syndicate is the future. We control everything. Join us, and you'll have a position of power that Vincent could never offer you. Maria clenched her fists, feeling both the weight of her family's legacy and the lure of the Syndicate's offer. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, her voice tight. Luca leaned in slightly. "Your loyalty. And the loyalty of anyone who stands with you." Luca's words linger in the air as Maria silently weighs her options. She could feel the pulse of her own ambition, the hunger for power that had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. But she also knew the consequences of aligning herself with such dangerous forces. Finally, after a long silence, Maria stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, across the room to the window, looking out at the rain. Luca remained silent, his eyes watching her every move. "I need time to think," Maria said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll let you know when I've made my decision." Luca nodded, his smile never wavering. "Of course. But remember, time is something you may not have. The Syndicate doesn't wait for anyone." As he left, Maria's thoughts raced. The game had begun, and now she had to decide if she was going to be a player or a pawn. The tension was unbearable. Maria sat in her office, the weight of the recent meeting with Luca pressing heavily on her chest. She had made her decision. The Syndicate's offer was too tempting to ignore. Power, control, and a chance to carve her name into the underworld's history. But as she gazed out the window, the rain falling in heavy sheets, a gnawing feeling of doubt tugged at her. She had always believed in the Marcelli family, in the bloodline that had built the empire. But now, that belief felt like a distant echo. Her phone buzzed again, but this time the message was different. The words seemed to freeze her in place. "It's your brother. He's been working with them all along." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Her brother, the one person she trusted above all others, was a traitor. This revelation shattered the fragile sense of security she had been holding on to. The person she had relied on most in this dangerous game had been playing a double game. The world she had been so sure of now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse. As the rain beat against the window, Maria knew that this betrayal would change everything. She had to confront her brother, but the truth she was about to face could destroy everything she had worked for. The room was silent when Maria's brother, Daniel, walked in. His steps were slow, measured, as if he had known she was waiting for him. Daniel was younger, with the same sharp features as Maria, but where she had always worn her power openly, Daniel had always preferred subtlety, operating from the shadows. As he stepped into the dimly lit office, Maria didn't greet him. She simply stood, staring at him with cold intensity. "Maria," Daniel said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of tension, "I assume you've read the message." Maria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer to him, her gaze unwavering. "Why, Daniel?" she finally asked, her voice low but filled with betrayal. "Why would you do this, after everything we've been through?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, but his expression remained calm. "You're playing a game, Maria, but you're not playing it well. You're too caught up in the past to see the future. I've been working with the Syndicate because they're the only ones who can offer real power. The Marcelli Empire is dying, and you're too proud to admit it." Maria's heart ached as his words hit home. He was right. She had been clinging to the past, to a legacy that was slipping away. But hearing it from Daniel, her own blood felt like a knife to the chest. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of everything they had built together. The words hung in the air like a storm, heavy and threatening. Maria couldn't look away from Daniel, the man who had once been her closest ally, her confidant. His betrayal was raw, and it stung more than she could have anticipated. "You always thought you were the one destined to lead," Daniel continued, his voice softer now, almost regretful. "But you're not. Not anymore." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've seen the future, Maria. I've seen what the Syndicate can offer us. You can either join me, and we'll rise to power together, or you'll be left behind, just another casualty of your refusal to change." Maria's breath hitched as she processed his words. The betrayal was one thing, but hearing him speak so coldly about her future cut deeper than she had ever imagined. He was right. The Marcelli family was crumbling, but she wasn't ready to let go of everything she had fought for. Still, her brother's words had lodged themselves deep in her heart, creating a chasm she wasn't sure she could cross. Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, they all swirled inside her, but she couldn't let it show. Not yet. "So, this is how it ends," Maria said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "My own brother turning his back on everything we built. For what? A chance at power?" She shook her head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Daniel's gaze softened for a moment, but the resolve in his eyes never wavered. "This isn't personal, Maria. This is business. We've been fighting for scraps for too long. The Syndicate offers us something real." He paused. "I did this for both of us." Maria's heart hardened at his words. "Whoa. For both of us? Or just for you?" She shot back. "You've always been more interested in power than family. I should have seen it earlier." The weight of his betrayal was too much to bear. It wasn't just a personal wound anymore. It was a fracture in the foundation of everything she had believed in. The silence between them was deafening. Maria stood there, grappling with the reality of what Daniel had just said. The truth was undeniable now. Her brother had chosen his path, and it was no longer with her. She had to make a choice now, one that would define the rest of her life. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. This time, it was a message from Luca, the Syndicate representative. "Time's running out. Join us or you'll be left behind." The words were stark, but they were also an ultimatum. Maria had no more time for hesitation. The decisions she made now would seal her fate. "I'm done, Daniel," she finally said, her voice cold. "You've made your choice, and I've made mine." She turned to walk away, her mind racing with the consequences of her actions. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but Maria had always been a survivor. And now, she would take control, no matter the cost. Maria stood in the center of her dimly lit office, the weight of her decision settling in. She had made her choice. The Syndicate was her future. As the tension built between the factions, she couldn't afford to wait any longer. Every move she made from this point on would determine her survival. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Tony, his expression unreadable. "We've gathered everything. It's time," he said, his voice firm. Maria looked up, nodding slowly. The time for hesitation was over. She had to act, even if it meant burning every bridge she had left. She trusted no one now, not even Tony. The power struggle was only beginning, and Maria needed to be at the center of it. Or she would be consumed by it. The meeting place was discreet, a dark alley hidden between two nondescript buildings. Tony had arranged it, and Maria didn't question his judgment. She arrived first, her black car pulling up silently. The streetlights cast long shadows, making the alley feel like a place of secrecy and danger. As she waited, her mind raced. Was this the right move? She couldn't afford doubt. When Tony arrived, he introduced her to the Syndicate as higher-ups. Their faces were cold, calculating. One of them, a tall man named Victor, spoke first. "This is your last chance. We offer you power, but only if you prove your loyalty. Betray us, and you will be destroyed." Maria nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for power anymore, she was fighting for survival. The Syndicate's demands were clear. Maria would have to eliminate a rival faction, the Vital family, to prove her loyalty. It was a risky move, but Maria knew it was the only way forward. With Tony by her side, she planned the strike. As they gathered their forces, the reality of what she was about to do set in. There would be no turning back. She would either succeed and solidify her position, or she would fall victim to the very game she had joined. The night before the attack, Maria stood alone in her office, staring at the map of the city. The Vital family's territory was outlined in red. She had no choice now. It was do or die. The attack on the Vital family's compound was swift and brutal. Maria had never been one to shy away from violence, but the cold efficiency of the operation shocked even her. As her men stormed the building, Tony remained at her side, watching the chaos unfold. The sounds of gunfire echoed through the streets, but Maria remained calm. She knew the stakes. As they reached the inner chambers, Maria found herself face to face with Matteo Vital, the head of the rival family. He was unarmed, but his eyes were filled with defiance. "You think you can just take everything?" he spat. Maria stepped forward, her voice steady. "I don't just take. I take what's mine." With one swift motion, she signaled her men, and the final blow was struck. With the Vital family's headquarters now under her control, Maria stood at the top of the tower, looking out over the city. The rain had stopped, and the night was still. The power she had gained was intoxicating, but she could feel the price of it already. The Syndicate had delivered, but at what cost? As she watched the city below, she knew that there would always be a target on her back. Enemies, old and new, would rise against her. But Maria was no stranger to survival. She had already made her choice, and now she would make sure that no one could take her down. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself, her voice steady. "No one can stop me now." Maria stood alone in the dimly lit penthouse, the weight of the Syndicate's world now resting on her shoulders. The decisions she had made, the betrayals, the bloodshed, were beginning to close in. As she looked out at the city below, the silence was suffocating. She had conquered the Vital family, but now the true battle began. Her phone buzzed with a new message, this time from an unknown number. "You can't run from what you've started." Maria's heart raced as she read the ominous warning. This wasn't just a war for control. It was a war for her very survival. The Syndicate had used her as a pawn, but now she was no longer their tool. The enemy was closer than she had realized, and Maria knew that the only way to keep her power was to strike first. She would have to fight against everyone, including those she had once called allies. The next day, Maria met with Tony in a dark, quiet cafe. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken words, both of them aware that everything was about to change. Tony spoke first, his voice low. "They're coming for you, Maria. The Syndicate is closing in." Maria's gaze was steely. "I know, but they won't have me, not without a fight." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, and placed a folder full of intel on the table. "We strike first. We take them down before they even know what hit them." Tony hesitated for a moment but nodded. He knew she was right. Maria was no longer just fighting for power. She was fighting to stay alive. The plan was set into motion. Maria and Tony led a covert operation against the Syndicate's most trusted operatives. They had only one chance. The warehouse, where their enemies were holed up, was heavily guarded. As they crept through the dark, Maria's thoughts were focused, sharp, calculating. Every step, every movement mattered. The enemy was expecting an attack, but they had underestimated Maria's strategy. The tension was palpable as they positioned themselves. With a nod from Maria, the attack began. Gunfire erupted, breaking the silence of the night, but Maria's resolve remained unshaken. She wasn't just fighting for the Syndicate's approval anymore. She was fighting to rewrite the rules. The gunfight was chaotic, brutal. Maria moved with precision, her mind focused entirely on the mission. Her men followed her lead, executing every move flawlessly. But amidst the chaos, she saw something, a figure in the distance, moving toward her with a familiar gait. It was Luca, the Syndicate's mastermind. He had been playing her all along. The realization hit her like a cold wave. Maria's heart pounded as she turned to face him. "You," she said, her voice cold with fury. "You were never on my side." Luca smiled, a thin, dangerous grin. "Did you really think you could control this, Maria? The Syndicate was always mine." With that, the final confrontation began. The confrontation between Maria and Luca was swift but intense. Their words were daggers, cutting through the air as they exchanged fire and insults. Maria, fueled by the betrayal, fought with a fury she hadn't known she was capable of. The final moments came quickly. With a swift, decisive move, Maria took Luca down. As he lay on the ground, gasping for air, Maria looked down at him. "You were never the king," she whispered. "I am." With that she walked away, leaving Luca to fade into the shadows, his empire crumbling behind him. Maria had won, but the cost was unimaginable. She had survived, but she was forever changed. Maria stood at the balcony of her penthouse, looking out at the city that had both built and broken her. The echoes of gunfire, the bloodshed, and the betrayals were all in the past now, but they weighed on her soul. Despite her victory, she felt hollow. She had achieved what she set out to do, but at what cost? The ghosts of the people she had lost, the alliances shattered, haunted her every thought. The power she now held was absolute, but it came with an unbearable burden. Her reflection in the glass mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. She had won, but at the price of her soul. The question now lingered: could she ever truly escape the darkness, or was she forever chained to it? Days passed, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in the empire she had built. Her allies, once loyal, now feared her. Her enemies, once defeated, still lingered in the shadows. She had dismantled one empire only to create another, but at what cost? In her moments of reflection, Maria wondered if it was possible to ever redeem herself. Could there be a life beyond the violence and power? The answer eluded her, and the feeling of emptiness gnawed at her. The night after a meeting with the remaining Syndicate members, she found herself standing in front of a mirror, staring into her own eyes, trying to find the person she once was. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Maria's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden sound of a phone ringing. She answered without hesitation, her voice calm. "What is it?" The voice on the other end was familiar: Tony. He had always been her right hand, her enforcer, but there was something different in his tone this time. "Maria," Tony said, "there's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent. It's about your future." Maria's pulse quickened. Who could it be? The past had come knocking once again. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever this visitor brought, but she had no choice. The time for running had passed. She had to face what was coming. The visitor entered silently, his presence immediately felt. He was a man in his late 40s, impeccably dressed, with an air of authority that matched Maria's own. He introduced himself as an emissary from the highest levels of global power. "We've been watching you, Maria," he said, his voice cold but respectful. "Your rise has caught the attention of those who truly control the world." The words hit her like a blow. Maria had always known the Syndicate was only part of a larger game, but this was something else. The forces behind the curtain were now stepping into the light, and Maria realized that she was a pawn in a much larger scheme than she ever imagined. The emissary's words echoed in Maria's mind long after he left. "Your power is impressive, Maria, but it is not enough. The world you fought for is about to change. You either join us, or you fall." The ultimatum was clear. Maria had worked her entire life to build her empire, but now it seemed even that wasn't enough. As she walked back to her penthouse balcony, the weight of the decision crushed her. She had already lost so much. Could she afford to lose it all now? In the silence of the night, Maria knew that she had to make a choice. Would she join the global powers, or fight to retain her independence, risking everything in the process? Maria stands on a pier, reflecting on the emptiness of her victory. The city lights fade behind her as she realizes that her power has come at the cost of her soul. She's won, but the price of survival feels unbearable. Tony calls, warning her that the war isn't truly over. Maria, however, rejects his plea to re-enter the game. She has paid enough. Despite the call, she realizes there's no escape from the world she's been a part of. Maria walks down a rain-soaked street, contemplating her isolation. The city around her is empty, a stark reflection of the emptiness she feels inside. The war may be over, but the battle for peace within herself is ongoing. Back in her apartment, Maria feels the overwhelming weight of her past decisions. Her empire is gone, and so is the person she once was. The silence in the room symbolizes the end of her journey, but the burden of her choices remains. Maria stands on her balcony, gazing at the city. The battle is over, but she's still haunted by the price of survival. She closes her eyes, knowing that the war within her will never truly end.